This is the brand new Wahoo Element Ace bike computer, the company's biggest bike computer, most expensive bike computer, and unfortunately the most unbaked bike computer to date. I've been putting the Wahoo Ace through its paces on a slate of rides, from epic climbs to mountain biking, gravel rides, structure workouts, and more, all to see what works well, the bike bell, what's so-so, this wind sensor right there, as well as what's just simply flat out missing, because there's a lot of that. So with that, I'll just simply get right into it. Starting off with the price, it is priced at $599 US and all the other currencies that you see right there. For that $599 US, you get yourself this box, and inside this box, you're gonna find the bike computer, a USB-C cable, as well as that metal mount. Now, of course, the reason it needs that metal mount is this thing is so beastly that it would pretty much snap most plastic mounts out there, and we'll get to that in just a second. That metal mount will work on any sort of round handlebars, but not any sort of aero bars that may not be round. For that, you're gonna need some sort of third-party out front mount, which is pretty much the norm for other bike computers. So then let's talk about the elephant in the room, the size. No matter how you look at this on camera, it might seem small or reasonable. It is neither. It is a beast in terms of size, but more importantly, weight. Here is compared to a bunch of other bike computers from a size standpoint first. Here it is head on, and then looking at kind of like a profile from the side, if you will. Then looking at the weights, here you can see the weights as well. At 208 grams, it is by far the heaviest bike computer on the market. There's nothing even close to it. The challenge with the size, though, isn't actually so much how it looks on your bars, it's the fact that it's not compatible with most mounts. It's sort of the same problem that Garmin had with their Edge 1050 bike computer when it came out last summer, and that larger size meant it was really only compatible with XL-sized mounts. If you have something like the K-Edge XL, it'll work with that. On my Canyon road bike here for the out front mount, it technically fits in there, but like it leaves skid marks as you rotate it around there. But you know it gets in there, so that's probably the most important thing, at least until you talk about the weight. The challenge with the 208 grams isn't so much the weight by itself, it's when you want to add accessories to the bottom of a mount, something like a GoPro action camera or lights or whatever it may be. That's where you run up against some legitimate concerns. I asked Wahoo whether or not the K-Edge mount they're recommending, kind of the out front mount there, was certified to work with the GoPro as well, and they said K-Edge hasn't confirmed that's actually the case yet. They don't believe it's having any problems, but unfortunately there's not really any known good solutions. I have not yet did not mean to do that. I have not yet had the balls to put a GoPro on the bottom of this and see if it'll hold the mount over gravel or any sort of bumps at all. Hopefully we'll get some clarity from some of these companies as to whether or not that's viable or just simply not a good idea. That said, despite how many people will be justifiably making fun of the size of this thing, personally, it actually doesn't bother me. And that's probably because I'm somewhat unique and I put a stupid amount of stupid things on top of my handlebars all the time. So having one just oversized bike computer is really a lot less than like 3 to 4 that I usually run for testing. So personally, the size doesn't bother me as much as it might for some people, but that's just me. Oh, hey, and just a quick note, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, just simply watch it all the way through. That's frankly all the YouTube gods really care about these days. Just watch it all the way through, give it a like or something, but yeah, just watch it all the way through. Now, of course, with that size comes the display, and in particular, this much bigger display. It's the biggest display out there on a bike computer today, and actually, correction, sorry, this thing is actually bigger. It's a 3.8-inch display, sporting 16 million colors, which is essentially 15,999,936 more colors than the 64-color Wahoo Roam V2. So here's how it compares in direct sun against a bunch of other bike computers out there, and then here's how it compares in the shade against a bunch of other bike computers out there. In terms of real-world riding, it ranks actually kind of in the middle. At the very top of the list in terms of visibility of the screen is by far the Garmin Edge 1050. There's no real competitor there. The next stop down is the Hammerhead Karoo 3 and frankly probably also the Karoo 2 as well, both being far more brilliant than the Wahoo Ace. Then there's the Ace, and then after the Ace you've got something like the Garmin Edge X40 series, so the 1040, the 840, the 540, all using basically the same screen technology. And those X40 series aren't all that much different than this in the grand scheme of things. You see, one of the challenges of this screen is the fact that it has a backlight timeout. Now, by default, when you take it out of the box, it's set in a mode called auto. Instead, Wahoo's claim of 30 hours is based on a 5-second timeout, which means that the screen times out in 5 seconds, like it is right there, and then if you tap it, in some way, shape, or form, it lights back up again for another 5 seconds. In that timeout mode, it's not awesome at all. So then we stick it back in that auto backlight timeout mode, and then we get about 10 to 15 hours of battery. I've had some rides that are basically 10% an hour, so 10 hours of battery life, and then some that are a little more than that, but the most I've ever gotten out of a ride is 17 hours worth of time there in terms of calculating that out over the course of the ride. And I've tried lots of different things from map data fields to navigation to sensor changing and all that kind of stuff, and there are some vague trends there, but in general, it's nowhere near what Wahoo's claiming for the battery life in a real usage scenario. But the good news is it's a big screen. So if you're all about big screens, everything else be damned, then you've got a big screen. So let's talk about something that is really good, which is the bike bell. So you can just simply, oh, you can't do it on that page, hold on. There we go, the bike bell. So you can tap a data page to go ahead and hear that bike bell whenever you want. So you're approaching someone up ahead, you just simply double tap real quick, and there's a bike bell sound. But as you saw, one of the challenges is that not all data pages support that. So for example, if I'm on the map data page, doesn't work. If I'm on the elevation data page right here for climb, doesn't work. If I'm in a structured workout data page, it doesn't work either. And of course, the good news is that in a future firmware update, it should be relatively easy for them to add the bike bell to all of the pages. And it is very solid. Arguably, it's my favorite feature, and it does sound pretty much exactly like the Garmin Edge 1050 one. Here's the Wahoo one, and here's the Edge 1050 one. Basically identical, same loudness and all that kind of goodness. In the meantime though, you've got the wind sensor up there. Now, I said wind sensor, not aero sensor. Do not mix those two up, they are not the same. You can repeat after me 3 times. This is not an aero sensor, at least not today anyways. The main purpose of this is simply to tell you your airspeed, or rather your relative airspeed. It's actually kind of confusing in reality. So the air comes in this little tube right here, like most other aero sensors out there, or wind sensors if you will. And then from there you'll get a single data field that you can use on the device that is your airspeed. It'll either show airspeed in kilometers per hour or miles per hour, depending on what you have it set there, like you see right here. In this case, I made this data page with my ground speed at the top and my airspeed at the bottom there. From there, you can see whether or not you effectively have a headwind or some sort of tailwind, or might be in a draft kind of behind someone, either a group of people, etc. The challenge, of course, as you can see there, is it doesn't tell you your actual headwind or your actual tailwind or effectively your boost or drag from other things. So instead what you need to do is take the top number minus the bottom number, and then you can figure out whether or not you have a headwind or a tailwind. I don't really understand that. I don't really want to do math while I'm riding. I just want to know what that headwind component is or what that tailwind component is. If they want to relabel it to be drag or gains or whatever it is to be able to fit the various descriptions there, that would be much, much easier than doing math mid-ride. Still, it is kind of fun to play around with. So myself and DesFit were out riding on this nice, really long straightaway to make this really easy to kind of demonstrate. So you can see as I'm off to the side right here, those two numbers are relatively similar. And as I slide in kind of behind his wheel there, at that point those numbers separate and it starts to show me basically the boost that I'm getting from being behind him from a slipstream perspective. Then as I edge back out to the left again, it goes ahead and gets me back into the wind, and thus I'm back to sort of normalcy. The same is true last week in Amsterdam on a breezy day. It was about 50 km/h headwinds there. I ducked in behind this group right there to get some relief from the wind. And then as I fell off the back of the group, you can see those wind numbers spike again. Nonetheless, I just want to see the number displayed as opposed to having to do math. Now, some of you may be asking whether or not we're going to see CDA on this, and the answer is probably not. CDA being basically your coefficient, a drag, or essentially how aero you are from a number standpoint. And there's been many, many companies that have tried to break into the aero sensor market over the last almost decade, essentially. And even some of the biggest companies. Garmin bought Alpha Mantis back a number of years ago in their aero sensor, and ultimately abandoned that project in terms of moving it into a consumer device like this. Instead, almost every single aero company to date, except one, has gone towards coaches and other sort of coach scenarios for aero testing of sorts. And that's because when it comes to aero testing, the simple act of shrugging your shoulders like this to this, that little bit right there, is the difference between a good test run and a bad test run. And whether or not you have a coach that's standing by the sidelines to go, oh, you just went like this, or you moved your fingers from here to there, you probably won't be able to do aero testing correctly. And so I don't think we're ever going to see CDA displayed on this device. We'll probably see some other aero stuff down the road. I would hope so. After all, I put this thing in there, and hopefully we'll see something there, but I would not be holding your breath for any sort of CDA type stuff in this device anytime soon. Now, one of the big changes in the Ace is a completely revamped UI. So let's just take a second to walk through this user interface just so I can show you what it looks like. So this is the new home screen right here, essentially a ready to ride screen. Right now the backlight is basically in the dim state, so I can press any of the buttons here to light up the backlight. And the very top is my new workout profiles, soon to be renamed activity profiles. If I select that, I can see I have different profiles that I've created. So I've got road cycling, mountain biking, gravel biking, biking indoors, and each of these have different data fields associated with it. I can tap back. To get back, you'll notice there is, of course, that touchscreen now. I can go down to routes, and I can choose routes there. And you can see my routes that I've pulled in from Komoot and Strava and so on. We'll get to a whole routing discussion in just a second. Backing out here, I've got my structured workouts. These are coming from Training Peaks here and a few other platforms. More on that in a second as well. And then click back one more time, and down the bottom here I've got my sensors. So these sensors will automatically light up when I turn on things. Now, I can swipe down from the top there and get into the different settings. Here's my backlight settings. I can do light and dark display mode. I can lock the screen. There's notifications there. And then basically down to the phone pairing. I can swipe to the right to look at my sensors again right there. I can pair new sensors. And then swipe again to the right to get into my workout profiles, routes, workouts, summit segments, and activity history down at the bottom here. By swiping back up like this, I get into the ready to ride dashboard. And then to start, I just simply press that start button right there, and I'm off and running. At this point, I can swipe left and right through my data fields, their data pages rather. These are the data pages I've set up for that particular activity or ride profile. Again, going through here, there's my map and so on through the different data pages. As you might expect, you can press the lap button to create a lap at any point in time. And as always, you can tap the bike bell as long as you're on a data page and not to one of the other pages. As you're running along, like you see in this video right here, you're going to see a bunch of your real world data. As you approach a climb, you'll automatically get these summit segments show up. So basically it's going to calculate the climb details for you automatically, whether or not you have a route loader. You don't have to have any route loader at all. It does that and shows your basically distance and elevation at the top of the climb. And then on the map screen, it'll also show you in those chevrons there, your gradient displayed as well, effectively different color coding for how steep or painful that gradient is. Unfortunately, at this point in time, there is no Strava Live segments on the Wahoo Ace. That's a feature that's coming sometime next year, but there isn't like an exact time frame or month or week for when that's going to return. Something that's been on Wahoo bike computers for, well, many, many years. Now, the next section to talk about is structured workouts. This afternoon, I went out for a ride. So I went into my unit here and then looked up my Train Road workout, but unfortunately, that wasn't supported yet. Train Road is not yet lit up in the Wahoo Element Ace. So then I went to Exert. That's also not working yet either in the Wahoo Element Ace. So then I went to Training Peaks, and that was there. So got my Training Peaks workout loaded up on this unit, and off I went. But about 5 minutes into the ride, I noticed that the progress bar was not progressing at all. So in the warm-up period, the progress bar doesn't actually work. It just doesn't. And then when you get to the end of the warm-up period, I had set that workout to use the lap button before it advanced on to the next section. It ignored that and just went on to the next interval. The good news, though, is that from then on out, the rest of the intervals did work, as long as I was on the structured workout page. If I was on any other data page or data field, it wouldn't tell me anything about the structured workout. It didn't pop up when my intervals were starting or ending. It didn't pop up when I was in or out of zone. It actually just didn't do anything. 3, 2, should be about there. Boom, that should be the start of the interval, right? Got no warnings whatsoever. If we go back and check, we'll probably see, yep, started about 5 seconds ago. Nothing at all. Nonetheless, let's talk about navigation and routing. In the case of the Ace, it supports platforms like Strava routes as well as Komoot routes. However, it doesn't yet support Trailforks routes, or at least it's not on the list of apps that you can use today. In my case, I primarily use Strava routes and Komoot routes. And so I synced my Strava account into the Wahoo app, which in turn pushes it to this device here, and it pulled in hundreds and hundreds of routes from many years worth of my Strava routes history onto the device. That'd be normal. That's actually pretty similar to how other devices work, except one problem. There's no longer a sort or filtering option on the Wahoo Element Ace. There used to be on the Roam and the Bolt and everything else for that matter out there today, but not the Ace yet, which means I'm left with just a jumbled mess of routes. They're not even sorted by like when I added them. When I add a new route each day, it just goes somewhere in this list of hundreds of routes. You can use the search box at the top, but you have to remember what you titled that route. And if you create a lot of routes, you know you probably often title them creative little things, and now you gotta remember what that creative little thing was a couple days ago. It's super cumbersome compared to just sorting by the newest possible route. Nonetheless, once I select my route, there's the option to do it in reverse, which is appreciated. It's something that the Garmin Edge series devices bizarrely don't have. I don't understand why you can't reverse a route on a Garmin Edge, but can on a Garmin wearable. In any case, you can do it on the Wahoo Ace, so good job there. You select the route, you start the route. At this point, as you're riding, you're going to see the chevrons indicating the route on the map there. As you approach a turn, you get a notification displayed on the unit, basically telling you to turn left to right, etc. They're pretty good. My only quibble will be I wish the voice was a little bit higher pitched, because once you have a bunch of wind noise while you're descending or something like that.
Left turn ahead. Turn left. Left turn ahead.
The slightly lower pitched women's voice they use there, the digital creative voice, isn't quite as good as the 1050, which has a little bit higher pitched voice, but that's probably a really easy thing for them to adjust down the road. Speaking of down the road, there's that little elevation profile that you see right there. It shows 2 kilometers in the case of the Wahoo Ace. You can't actually expand that to any more. Normally on a Wahoo device, you can go ahead and just press these side buttons to zoom out. In fact, you can zoom out to the entire route. And in fact, the Wahoo Element Ace box shows it zoomed out. The only picture on the Wahoo Element Ace box shows it zoomed out to the full route length. You can't do that. That's not there today either. I don't understand, like, again, the only picture on the box. Well, there's a picture of the mountain, but the only graphical picture on the box you can't actually do today. At least in terms of navigation, that would work. I got to where I was going, I got home, all that fun stuff works. You can, end a route midway, you can navigate back to the start, like all that's good. Just the little things. You gotta finish the little things. In any case, once you finish your ride, you're gonna go ahead and see your completed ride details on the unit. You can see all of your stats about that ride, based on your power numbers, you can see your wind numbers, etc. They'll also sync off to the Wahoo app as well, and you can see that same detail and even more detail there as well. Further, they'll sync to Strava and Trending Peaks. Oh, sorry, they actually won't sync there either, by the way. Not by default anyways. See, when you linked up the Wahoo app to Strava and Trending Peaks and Komoot and whoever else, the default option isn't to upload your completed files to those platforms. You have to know to expand it out like you see right there and then check the box. What? I don't know what to say here. The good news is we can talk about accuracy. In accuracy, I don't need the unit for because it's good. Across the board, it's quite good. Let's take a little bit deeper dive into this really quick. All the data sets are linked down below there. You can see here the elevation spot on against other units that I trust. Looking at the switchback section here, descending these tight switchbacks, no problems. Ascending these switchbacks, no problems either. Going to yet another set of switchbacks right here. Very, very tight descent and no problems there either. If I look at the heart rate data, it's just a comparison point. All these connected to the same heart rate strap. Everything is identical across the board, and I saw the same on power meter data as well. Even looking at like the lowest possible denominator there, which is your distance and ascent, those are very, very close between those units. I mean, astoundingly close. Point being, I have zero accuracy issues at all when it comes to elevation, GPS, or the data from the sensor side. Okay, so we reached kind of the summary here. Let's talk about where we are. And when I started this review, I figured I'd have to compare it to the Garmin Edge 1050 here, or the Edge 1040 series. So the 1050 is $699, and the Edge 1040 is at $499, and this sort of sits in the middle, right? That's in fact what Wahoo talked about in their media call, sitting there just below the Edge 1050, and they were aspiring it to be a better deal than the Edge 1050. But what I've realized over the last few weeks is I don't even need to have this whole conclusion section talking and comparing it to those other units, because it's so half-baked, you can't even compare it to Wahoo's own units. If I look at something like the Wahoo Bolt, which is currently on sale for $208, or the Wahoo Roam, which is 20% off, so basically half the price of this thing right here, both of those units are far more full-featured. They're completely baked after years and years of work, and ultimately, this unit should not have shipped until probably next spring. They should have kept on chugging on it, get all these things finished, because it does not compare to the Edge 1050. That's a laughable assertion. It does not compare to the Edge 1040, and it doesn't even compare to their own units that are multi-years old that cost, in the case of the Bolt, a third of the price. I wish I had like a better ending for this, and maybe we will in the spring. Maybe we get to that point and the unit will be more full-featured, but I don't know why Wahoo rushed this out. At the end of the day, no one's going out and rushing to buy a bike computer on December 3rd, but they are buying bike computers in the spring, and we know that's when most bike computer companies have historically released new bike computers. Waiting to the spring until it was finished would have probably netted a much better introduction for this product, a much better review, and ultimately much better sales for Wahoo. That's all I got for now. If you found this video interesting and useful, go ahead and give a like at the bottom or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. With that, have a good one.